So a smartwatch can do almost everything that a phone can, and a mechanical watch can do pretty much none of that. We don't really get it for purpose. It's not a tool anymore. It's more you get it because you like the engineering, you like the design. You know, it's much more of a heart versus head type of thing. So does a luxury smartwatch even make sense? Hi everyone and welcome to Shaluso, and yes, today I'm talking about luxury smartwatches. So just a couple weeks ago, Tag Heuer released the Super Mario Tag Heuer Connected, and that got me thinking, does this segment really make sense? Now I know it's a divisive topic, so definitely let me know in the comments below what you guys think, what your opinion on luxury smartwatches is, and whether they make sense or not. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. But today I want to go over two arguments for and two arguments against whether luxury watchmakers should be making these smartwatches. Starting out with the positives or the arguments for them making these smartwatches, the first one is that it actually brings more people into the hobby in general. To paraphrase Jean-Claude Biver, he said that when Swatch started making cheap quartz watches that everyone could afford, it was actually good for the luxury watch industry. And the reason why is because it got people used to having a watch. So then when, further down the line, if they'd have grown up with a Swatch on their wrist or even a Casio or something like that, when they had a little bit of extra money, the notion of having a wristwatch wasn't new. It was just a case of, all right, now I want to get one that's a little bit fancier or a little bit more advanced. And then he equated that to smartwatches, saying that that's sort of the next thing, especially in today's world where you really don't need anything on your wrist because your phone will cover everything for you. Smartwatches bring that presence back onto the wrist, and that in turn brings people into this hobby because after a while of having their Apple Watch, either they want to have something that's a little bit more luxurious, they want to have something that looks nicer, that looks a bit more formal perhaps, or they want to have something that's just more interesting than essentially the same thing they've got in their pocket being on their wrist. Whatever the reasons, it brings more people into the hobby. And then tying that into the specific brands that make these luxury smartwatches, primarily Tag Heuer, Hublot, also Montblanc, it brings people into these brands. These are brands that not everyone is into right away. It's not like Rolex where everyone outside of the hobby and inside the hobby knows them. And especially in the case of something like Hublot, not everyone has $13,000 to spend to get an entry-level Big Bang chronograph. But they might have $5,000 that they want to spend, and that gets them into the brand and it helps them get that loyalty. And this new Tag Heuer Mario is a great example of Tag Heuer bridging that gap with other niches, other interests. If you do a search for it, most of the results aren't actually watch sites. A lot of them are from non-watch communities highlighting this collaboration. So it's building more awareness towards Tag Heuer, and obviously by a knockoff effect to the luxury watch industry in general, because Tag Heuer is a part of that. The other reason for these luxury smartwatches is that they're cash cows. For every smartwatch that gets sold by Tag Heuer or Hublot or Montblanc, dollars from that go into paying for developing the next colored ceramic from Hublot, or bringing the nanograph that little bit closer into going into the Heuer O2 and more mass production. It happens in pretty much every industry. They need a high volume, high margin product that the masses can buy so they can then fund the cool stuff, fund the stuff that people like you and I enjoy that is a little bit more elaborate, but obviously doesn't appeal to everyone, that can't be sold to everyone, and that costs a lot of money to develop. It happens in the car industry as well. For every naturally aspirated V12 that gets pumped out of Lamborghini's Santa Agata factory, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of diesel-powered Golfs that funded that. And this is the same sort of thing. It gets people into the hobby, into the brand, and it funds more interesting things that even if these things seem off-brand, they're still working towards what that brand's core values are. But of course, that all sounds great, but there's also a lot of compelling arguments as to why these brands really shouldn't be dabbling in this space. The first off is that while yes, it does bring people into certain brands, it does bring exposure to these brands, it also dilutes them. When someone pays $5,000 for a Big Bang Connected, it's a tougher pill for them to swallow to then pay over double that for something that has less features, functionally less practical, and will probably cost them more to maintain in the long run. So in that sense, while it may bring some people in, it'll also dilute the brands in terms of just the raw value proposition. The same thing when you look at Tag Heuer. For half the price of a Carrera caliber 16, you have the connected, which can do more. And that transition won't always happen in the way that the brands anticipate it. So what it ends up doing is it just ends up diluting a little bit that value proposition. Because we know that, for example, a caliber 16, that's a Sellita SW500. If that's the only difference between the connected, which is made out of very, very cheap componentry on the inside, because it's all just digital, it's all silicon and chips, it does make you wonder, where's that $2,000 gap to get to the Carrera? Because it can't just be in that movement. So again, it makes for a harder sell. It makes it harder to sell that value add that traditional watchmaking normally has, which is about more than just what you see. So when you blur those lines between form and function a little bit too much, then people start asking some of the wrong questions and it dilutes the perception of the brand in general. But the much bigger problem, or the much bigger argument against, in my view, is the notion of forced obsolescence. Forced obsolescence is essentially that notion that tech companies force you to upgrade by their software going out of date, by the capacity of, its memory or how fast its processor is, all those things. These things go out of date sometimes in the space of 6 months, a year. That's completely antithetical to the notion of mechanical watches specifically, because mechanical watches have already accepted that they're obsolete. They're about 50 years obsolete. Luxury watches exist as a luxury commodity. And one of the key things about luxury is that it doesn't go obsolete. Luxury is luxury. It may go out of style from time to time, but it still does its job. A mechanical watch will still be just as useful provided you service it in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I struggle to think that my cell phone that I had when I was 20 would still work today. I'd probably get no service, it wouldn't connect to the internet, it wouldn't do anything. So that notion of forced obsolescence really does clash with luxury. And a great example of this is Vertu. Now, if you haven't heard of Vertu, then that kind of tells you all you need to know about it. Vertu was a cell phone manufacturer that would make luxury cell phones, and I mean like hyper luxury. They would make phone cases in titanium and leather, exotic materials, carbon fiber, and they looked really, really cool. However, the nature of what was inside them meant that they would go obsolete in a few years, like any Nokia. And things get even worse as we move into the smartphone generation, because at the end of the day, all smartphones look pretty much the same. They're all just a giant screen. The only thing that sets them apart is what's on the inside. And what's on the inside goes bad in a few years anyway. So in that sense, it really does contradict the notion of why are these companies whose entire business model is based on ignoring obsolescence dipping their toes into a market where forced obsolescence is the way that these companies make money, by forcing you to upgrade. So this is the point really where you need to take a call on what your thoughts are and what your end verdict is. In my view, they do make sense. They pay for interesting models that I have more of a preference for. And also I can definitely respect that they bring people into the hobby. I think Jean-Claude Bivet is right in that these are the Swatch of today's generation. It's people putting something on their wrist, getting used to it. And whenever that point is that they want something that's a little bit less common, that's a little bit more mechanically interesting, something they don't need to replace every few years or get software updates for, they're ready and primed to jump into this hobby to some degree at least. So even though I'm not the target market for these things, I can definitely see the appeal in them. And I can definitely see the appeal both for consumers as well as for the companies that make them. So in my view, yeah, they make sense. They're just not for me. But I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments below. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and share it. If you want to see more pictures and infographics as seen throughout this and all my other videos, then make sure you follow me on Instagram at Shaluso. And if you want to see more videos of watches, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell as well so you know when the next video comes out. In any case, thanks for watching this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.